tonight. It was a big day today, and a lot to take in. And so it's an honor to be here on the 20th of January. A little bit more about myself, just to let you guys know, I spent about 15 years of my adult life in corporate America, and then transitioned out of that and now do full-time ministry. So I have navigated the corporate arena into ministry arena, and have learned a lot along the way, and the tensions that come in both sides of that. So I know that Joe told me today that you guys have walked through some incredible workshops. I think the last workshop that you guys did was around goal setting. You've done one on kind of celebrating your assets and resources, what you have at your disposal. And so tonight, what I want to move us into is what I have found time and time again is we can do all of that work, sometimes, oftentimes still feel stuck. And usually it's us. We're the ones in our own way, not someone else or something else. And so Joe titled this talk, Understanding the Person in the Mirror. And so we're going to unpack that a little bit. But my goal for us is, after we do that unpacking of understanding the person in the mirror, we turn away from the mirror and go do the work. And so I want to encourage you to use that chat box. If any of you have spent any time on Zoom in the last year, you know, talking to a screen is can be a little, I always say it's like, I love the energy in a live room. And so feel free to use that chat box. I'm going to ask you guys a question here in about 10 minutes, and I'm really going to want your answers. So when Joe said this about, hey, well, and he and I had a conversation about this, and he said, you know, I love this idea of talking about understanding the person in the mirror. I thought of this verse from James, and I just want to read it from the Passion Translation. It's from James 1. And I thought that it captures this idea and what my goal is for us tonight. But it says, if you listen to the word and don't live out the message you hear, you become like the person who looks in the mirror of the word to discover the reflection of his face in the beginning. You perceive how God sees you in the mirror of the word, but then you go out and forget your divine origin. But those who set their gaze deeply into the perfecting law of liberty are fascinated by and respond to the truth they hear and are strengthened by it. I love that part. And are strengthened by it. And they experience God's blessing in all that they do. So like I said, we want to do this work of understanding the person in the mirror, which we're going to talk about, but we want to turn away and be doers of the word. We want to go do. We want to go dream and do in 2021. Y'all have done some goal setting work. You have done some identifying assets. You have, I think, done some, I think there was a talk on taking leaps of faith, this idea of risk. And so I want us to dig a little deeper and identify what else that might be, that there might be holding you back from turning away from that mirror. Because I believe if we stand too long in that mirror, we will stay in the tension and stress of feeling too much and not enough. And I don't know about you, I have learned that this is not a gender specific tension. This is a human tension. Of feeling too much and not enough. We can trace it all the way back to the garden. And so before we start this session, I want to lay out something, kind of a distinction between assignment and calling. This was something that a dear friend of mine explained to me one time. I think we live in a culture that is a lot about finding your purpose, finding your calling, you know, what were you made to do? And honestly, we are in a season specifically with COVID, like COVID restrictions alone have prevented some of us from living out what we believe is our calling or purpose, which I know I have had things in my life that have to do with my assignment that I had to cancel this year. And I think also I have had conversations after conversations with people who they cannot describe to me what their purpose and calling is, and they feel so stuck. They feel hopeless and helpless. And I think when we feel this way, it starts to attack our identity and we wonder who we are. We feel a little bit lost. And again, in this tension of feeling too much and not enough. So I want to explain this concept of assignment versus calling, because for me, it freed me up. I'm going to take us real quickly. And I think that a lot of what this community, Build Love Through Community, is built on is this right here. And it's from Matthew 22:36. And it was this moment when the religious scholars were questioning Jesus about the commandments. And they were wanting to know, like, what is the greatest? What is the greatest? And most of us know his answer. It was, you were to love your God with every passion of your heart, all the energy of your being, with every thought that is within you, are your heart, soul, and mind. And then it says that's the greatest commandment. And the second one is just as important, to love your friend the same way you love yourself. So that is our calling. That is our ultimate calling, to love God and love others. And so what we do with that, how we live out that calling, is our assignment. And for me, when I understood that, it brought so much freedom. It relieved this stress of, am I living my purpose today? Am I living my calling today? I've got restrictions on my life. My finances are low right now. There's a pandemic I'm in that's canceling things. Illness might come in your life, and you might find yourself bedridden. I have a dear friend that found herself bedridden with a chronic disease and still does. She lives that way every day. So we do not know what will happen in our life. So our assignments can change. They may have seasons. They may start and stop. An entire assignment may change in our life, but our calling stays the same. And so I want to start there, because how we live out our calling is the good works that God's prepared in advance for us. Those are our assignments. And so my question is, what would it look like if we could understand the person in the mirror, find freedom from the tension holding us back, that stress, that tension, and then choose obedience to go do and dream in 2021? Like, what would that look like if we could dream and do free from that tension in 2021? Now, my mom was a school teacher for 37 years. And one of her favorite things to do was, she loved acronyms and she loved alliteration. That was always, she would literally write our names and fill out all these descriptions about us. So bear with me as I combine these two teaching tools. I am going to use the acronym for DREAM tonight as we go through this workshop. And I'm going to break it down into 2 points per letter. So this first letter, obviously D, 2 points I want to talk about in this area. The first thing we have got to do as we look in the mirror, and this sounds counterculture to what the world is telling us to do, but when we look in the mirror and we are doers of the word, we have got to die to self. That is the first thing that we have got to do. And there are 5 questions. And this is where I would love, if you're not driving, if you're at home, if you're on your phone, and you can hop in that chat, I would love, and Rachel, maybe you could even jot these down as I read through them, but I would love for you guys to answer one of these questions for me. You don't have to answer all of them, but I want you to consider for a moment 5 things. One, and I ask myself this regularly, these questions. If I'm finding myself in tension or in stress, I'm feeling held back, I'm feeling paralyzed, I take an inventory of what could be going on. And it's usually going to fall in one of these 5 questions. The first one is, what fear is holding you back? Where are you not trusting God? Like, what fear keeps you up at night? I think this last year, there has been evidence of sleepless nights in so many people I know. People just having a hard time. Anxiety has kept them in bondage, and it's rooted in so much fear. The second question that I ask myself is, what lie am I believing about myself, about others, and most importantly, what am I believing about God? Like, where do I not believe that he is who he says he is? But this is also, what lies am I believing about other people? So where am I making assumptions about other people that I have not clarified? Where are we having expectations about other people that has not been mutually agreed upon? And so what lie are you believing about yourself, others, and God? The third question I ask is there sin that's entangling me? Is there unforgiveness in my life that I need to confess? Because oftentimes that will be the thing that we sometimes can't even see until we go before the Lord and ask. And you pray Psalm 139. If that is where you are and you're like, I want to know if there is anything in me. And then number 4 is, what distractions are derailing you right now? We love our comforts in this country, in this world. We love our comforts. So if it's, I mean, I can find myself grabbing my phone. Sometimes it's social media. It's been the news the last 2 weeks. For some of us, it's a relationship. For some of us, we are walking into this year trying to free ourselves from toxic relationships. So I don't know what that is for you in your life. It could be busyness. It could be the idol of busyness. I know in my past, workaholism was a thing for me because it brought me value and worth, because there were places in my life I felt no value and no worth. So I would pour myself into my work because it made me feel needed. And we have to be aware of those things. And then last, what shame is keeping you in bondage. This could be shame that you have held on to for years from your story. It could be something that you did, something done to you. It could be something last week. I don't know what it is, but oftentimes if we do the work, we can uncover shame holding us in bondage. And I want to be clear about one thing. There is a difference between guilt and shame. Guilt says I made a mistake and that needs to be confessed and the work needs to be done. Shame says I am a mistake. It is saying that I am a mistake, I am broken, and there is no hope for me. And so it is important to see the difference of those two things, because there is freedom from the shame. There is freedom. God's word says there is no condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus. There is freedom from that shame, but there is a responsibility to confess where we have made a mistake and where we need to confess that. There's a place for that. And so these are my 5 questions for you, because we often find ourselves most of the time, if you are feeling stuck and tension in this too much and not enough, it is usually in one of those places. And so I would love for just a couple of minutes for y'all to write. It could be one of those, 2 of those, but answer one of those questions, because I will tell you right now, this thing about community, it is so important, because when we start voicing these things inside community, it pulls us out of isolation and the lie that we are alone. And so when we can start confessing and laying these things down in front of others inside community, that is a step towards this bondage and this tension that these things are holding us in. You know, somebody said toxic people. Many people have removed themselves. Praise God. That's awesome. Sometimes we have to do the hard work of removing the people. And so I would ask yourself that there is incredible resources out there on boundaries, and that might be something you need to do this year, is start creating healthy boundaries in life if there are toxic people. But I know for me, you know, I think the lie, sometimes, I'm just going to say this right now, like the lie that I'm believing, I moved here to this area about 3 years ago. And I'm new to town. I'm new to friends. I'm new to community. I'm new in a church. I'm new in this world. And 3 years might sound like a long time, but when I've lived most of my adult formative years in another city, in another state, I can still sit in this lie that I am just too much for people. And I have seen time and time again, even last week, I sat in this tension and I had to revisit this lie that who says that I'm too much? And so I think we have got to keep revisiting these things. Somebody said, hard for me to focus on task or goal. Crystal, that is me. We're going to talk about here when I get to the R, I'm going to circle back to that. There is some understanding inside our personalities what our strengths and weaknesses are. I used to believe the lie that I was defective inside my personality because of that right there, because I have a hard time focusing on tasks and goals. Believing that people do not love or care for me when there is major disagreement. I would argue that we are in a culture that does not model that well. Again, why I love this community and what Joe's building is because we have got to learn how to do that. We have got to learn how to love people. And this is the hard part about that. We can model that and work on that, and it still not be reciprocated, but we're still called to do it. And so I think that's a hard one, is differentiating ourselves. And that's actually my next point. I won't skip too far ahead, but I'll speak to that in a second. Risk stability. To risk stability for growth. That is a really good, that's a fear. Steve talked about how I'm a champion of risk takers. I love coming alongside and championing, I don't know how to say that word, risk takers. I have thought through risk in light of, is risk really a thing? This is a question I asked myself last year. Is risk really a thing if we are in prayer, in the word, and in community? Can it be a little scary? Yes. Should we still go scared if we have prayed, we've been in the word, and we have sought counsel, wise counsel in community? And I wonder if things just really aren't as risky. Now, we have to be responsible inside our risk. But I think when we can start bringing in those three components into decisions that we're making, and trust that God will reroute us if we are going off course, trust his hand on us. The hope is that we move a little bit more bravely inside risk, but that is for sure. And especially in a really unstable time, we're in there is lack of stability all around us. But I think it's really good in that pushing. Y'all did good. These are really good things. Okay. If there's not any more, I'm going to move on to the second D. So we got to move through these. But I'm going to speak to what Steve brought up about believing people do not love or care for me when there's a major disagreement. And the second D is differentiate. It's this journey of living your life instead of someone else's. And this is not allowing someone else's opinions, thoughts, beliefs to control your own behavior and decisions. And that's tricky, especially if you have a heart to live in harmony with people. We often confuse that with pleasing people. And so I think we have to check our motive, and look at what it looks like to differentiate our true self from the demands and voices around us. So doing this work that you're doing in this 21-day intentional mindset work that y'all are doing is this work. It's being able to differentiate your true self from other people's voices, opinions, values, and beliefs. And then walking confidently in that, even if it's going to be displeasing to other people. So those are our 2 Ds, die to self and differentiate. 2 Ds. R, the 2 R's are repack and rhythm. So I think y'all have done some of this inventory work the last several days, but there is a very familiar passage in Mark 6 when Jesus tells the disciples to go feed the thousands of people with very few fish and very little bread. And he tells them to go do this. There are 3 words in there that I read, and they just jumped off the page to me last year. And he tells them to go and see. He says, go see what you have. And I believe that his intention was less about go see how many, go count how many you have. I think it was less about that and more about go see how little you have. Because I need you to see who I am and what I will provide in your very little resources. And so this idea, the work that y'all have been doing, I think we've got to do this work of repacking and doing the inventory of looking at our story. Every single one of you on this call has a story that often informs your burdens and passions and your heartbeat. Your story matters, and unpacking that story, writing that story, finding healing from that story matters. So this place where your story, your strengths, there is an amazing tool called Strengths Finder. I'm going to give you a few tools in here, very practical tools. There's a tool called Strengths Finder. It's this idea of, instead of focusing on improving your weaknesses, you look at your 5 top strengths, and it's how you do what you do. And so there's this, I think someone can correct me in here if I'm wrong. I might misquote this. I think there's 30, I'm going to say this wrong. I think there's like 34 in this one assessment tool, 34 strengths. And when you do the test, they order them from 1 to 34. Some amazing mathematician figured out that from the beginning of time to the end of time, there will not be 2 people whose order of 1 through 34 will be exactly the same, which honestly just blows my mind. And so if you want to dig a little deeper into how do you do what you do, this is a great tool. It's called Strengths Finder. But so where your strengths, number 2, and your motivations. So why you do what you do. Another great tool. If I had 2 more hours, I could dig deeper into this with you guys, but there's another tool called the Enneagram. It's a great tool. I believe that it can bring clarity to, and let me go back and look, somebody, Crystal mentioned, hard for me to focus on task or goal. The Enneagram is an assessment tool that basically says there are 9 different ways that we all view the world. And so it helps you identify which is that my one. I have a type, Steve has a type, Rachel has a type, we all have different types, how we view the world and what motivates us. My specific type struggles with follow through. And so I always believed that I was defective and could not accomplish things because that was always a weakness. But it's this idea of looking at that and not just saying, well, that's just how I am, so I'm never going to follow through. It does bring awareness to these areas we need to kind of improve in and become better. But it helps see what motivates you. And it helps me believe that I'm not defective. This is just how I'm wired. And how can God use me inside of that? And then last, values work. They're amazing. You could probably do any kind of Google search online. But this idea of figuring out your top 5 values, core values, helps you filter how you make decisions, how you spend your money, how you schedule your time. When you start looking at your core values and quit comparing yourself and trying to live according to someone else's definition of success, there is so much freedom in that. You will be less likely to strive in life when you are pursuing life, making decisions, spending your money, scheduling your time inside of your core values versus someone else's. Oftentimes, when there is conflict and a rub, it's because someone else has violated my core values and vice versa. That's usually what that is. What's important to me isn't important to someone else, and vice versa. And that's usually where there is conflict. But rarely are we discussing our values with people. But it goes a long way when you can first identify your own, especially if you're in relationship, a family unit, a marriage, figuring out, like for Rachel and Steve, for my husband and I, if I can figure out my values, his values, and we communicate that, it oftentimes brings light to where we have conflict. So repacking is this idea of taking an inventory of where your story, your strengths, your motivations, and your values intersect. And that is how we bring the kingdom to earth. That is how we do our assignment. And it's what that looks like. The second R that is so important is rhythm. This is hard for me. I'm a spontaneous, go with the flow, wing it kind of person. But when we look at scripture, God built into the fabric of creation rest, a rhythm of rest every 7 days. If you are not building that in, and Joe intentionally put this into this mindset work, this idea of rest and rhythm and slowing down, like that was built from the beginning of time into the fabric of creation. And so we need to live inside that rhythm, because we can be more productive in 6 days than we can in 7. He built it and rigged it that way. So my question is, have you built into your rhythm of life rest? And what rest looks like for you might look very different to somebody else. I heard a really good idea for rest from a friend. If you work 6 days a week with your brain, rest doing work with your hands. And if you work 6 days a week with your hands, rest using your brain. And it helps us switch and flip. And the other thing, rest, the reason it's built into the fabric of creation is that so we can remember that we are not in control. We are not the ones that keep the world spinning and everything running. And there is a surrender that comes with resting, and it is important. Okay. E, embracing your limits. This has brought me so much freedom. This idea of embracing my limits, acknowledging that I have limits, grieving those limits, and then embracing them. The idea is that we embrace our limits and not see them as liabilities. I want to give you some examples of this idea of limitations. We all have them. Everyone in this Zoom meeting has limitations. It could be in our physical body. I mean, down to I could never play basketball because I'm not, I mean, I guess I could have been a point guard, but I wasn't really that fast and I'm not really that tall. So physically, there are things we are limited. You know, the world tells you can do and be anything you want. And if you just put your mind to it, but there are physical and certain limitations that limit us on this earth. Our physical body. We have to sleep. We can't stay up forever. An example of physical limitation. Our family of origin. So our family, ethnicity, country of birth, our culture gave us gifts and limits. Our marital status. So whether you're single, married, have kids, don't have kids, it all comes with certain limitations. Our intellectual capacity. I am not the smartest person on this Zoom call. I guarantee you most of y'all are probably smarter than me. Talents and gifts. We are all limited in what we have been given in talents and gifts. Our time is limited. We only have so many hours in a day and so many years on this earth. Our work and relationship realities, we are limited in, and even our spiritual understanding. There is a lot I don't know about God, the mystery of God. I am limited in my spiritual understanding. But what happens if we do not embrace these limitations that exist on this earth is we will get stuck. I believe that we have been invited to co-labor with God in the continual restoration of his original intent for mankind. So back in the garden, his original intent existed. And I believe that we've been invited to co-labor with him to restore his original intent. But we will not fully see that this side of heaven, right? We're not going to, but we're invited to do the work of restoration with him. And at the same time, we're invited to live fully present in this broken world that is waiting for that promised restoration. But here's the tension. The tension comes when we strive in our co-laboring. We try to do more and be more than God ever intended us because we don't embrace our limits. And this leaves us unable to engage in kingdom work when we cannot live in both the now and not yet. I just said a lot of things, but this idea is when we feel held back by this does not mean don't work hard and don't do the work. That's not what I'm saying. But I think a lot of times we strive outside of what our limitations are. And I think back in that part in Mark 6, I think what I love about that go and see part is he was saying, go see what you have and go see what you don't have and see that you need me. And so this idea of comparison, and this is that tagline that Joe wrote out in this message, is one part of this stuck part is when we compare ourselves to other people. And we've heard this phrase, comparison is the thief of joy, right? I actually believe that kingdom comparison can be the giver of joy. Kingdom comparison. I went and looked up the definition of comparison in the dictionary, and it says that the definition of comparison is to establish similarities and dissimilarities between two things. So when I say that and I read that out loud, it is a neutral definition, right? It's not positive or negative. It's very, very neutral. And we see all through scripture God comparing things, similarities and dissimilarities. He talks about gifting, creation, wiring. So I'm convinced that we negatively compare when we operate out of insecurity and don't embrace these limits. So to kind of wrap this idea of kingdom comparison up, it is embracing our limits and not seeing them as liabilities, but celebrating the differences of others. So instead of wishing and envying our life, that somebody else's life, envying someone else's life, we celebrate our differences. And then the second E, so embracing our limits, the second E is establishing boundaries. And boundaries is somebody's word for the year. I wish I knew your name. So letting go of control of those around you. It's this idea of drawing the circle around yourself and not trying to control the lives of others. This takes time and energy. So there may be places this year you have got to do the work of boundaries. A is the DREA. Ask the Lord with open hands. That's the first A. Having a heart of surrender and a posture of surrender. I always have this, Lori, thank you. I always have this posture. We think about this posture of hands open. I always then open my fingers, and I have this posture. I want to have this posture of surrender. That all that is in me, I surrender back to the Lord, and whatever is not his will for me to hang on to, God, let it sift through my fingers. I don't want to hold on to anything that you never intended for me to hold on to, whether that is the work that I do, the burdens that I carry, the tensions that I hold. If there is something you do not want me to hold, may it sift through my hands. So ask the Lord with open hands to sift out what is not intended for you to hold. The second A, this goes right along with build love and community. Love this, is assemble your dream defenders. I use this concept, this word of dream defenders all the time. But a dream defender to me is this person who comes alongside in a very intentional way. It's amazing that y'all are doing this community, because it could be someone in here. Y'all now have similar language around this work. But it's this idea to bring someone into your life, to ask them to pray, encourage, even rebuke, challenge, call out, where you are believing lies, fears, where there is sin entangling, anything holding you back, someone that will come in and call that out in your life. So assemble your dream defenders. Celebrate obedience as the win. Not as much, achievements are awesome. There is a place for that. But and I think Malcolm was talking about this idea of risking stability for growth. Sometimes the obedience is just going scared, and that is worth celebrating. So celebrate obedience. Show up for your people. Be a dream defender to someone else. Be this description of a dream defender to someone else. Don't wait always for someone to be that for you. Go first and be that for someone in your community. And invite them into what God's doing, the stirring in your life. So that is A, the 2 points for A. And then last is M. So we've done D, R, E, A, and the last is M. And these two are make mistakes. I have this phrase I use all the time, go ugly early. Just go. Oftentimes for some of our personalities, we feel held back because it's not perfect. We don't have all the things we think we need to go. Some of you might be building a business and you feel held back because the logo isn't perfect, the website's not perfect, you don't have your messaging right. Some of you have some goals this year and you're hesitant to even start because they feel too overwhelming. This is where you have to start small and go ugly early. I always tell this story of I host a retreat twice a year in Colorado through my organization. And I had this vision to do it in Colorado. I wanted to be in the mountains. I wanted you to be able to look out and see a range. I had this vision. But advice was given to me that the first time you host something, you need to do it in a big city near an airport. It needs to be easy to get to, in and out. So I picked Denver. I was like, this is near the mountains. This will be great. I failed on the site visit to realize the place we would be having meetings was in a basement with no windows. I just failed to realize that until we were there with 50 women in a room with no windows. So we could have been in Iowa for all we knew. But I think what I needed to see in that moment, and I go back to it all the time, was it did not matter where we were or how pretty the room was or how perfect my vision was executed. God still moved. In what limitations I had where I was, God still moved. And I have needed to anchor in that every time I have a doubt or a fear or something holding me back from going ugly early. It's this idea that inside my limitations, what little I have, what resources I have, if I just be obedient and go, it keeps him in control every time, because then it's not about me and what I can accomplish. And then last, it's this idea of moving in obedience over outcome. The outcome is on the Lord. Our calling, our invitation from the Lord is to obey, to be obedient. The implications of our obedience, whether it's success or failure, flourishing or small, whatever that is God's to choose. But my responsibility is to obey. And so it's this idea of moving in obedience instead of being concerned with the outcome. And so those are this framework that I try to anchor to and consider when I look at what might be holding me back. These are the things that if I work through and I consider, it keeps me going and moving. And I want to end this, and then we can open it up if anyone has thoughts or responses or questions. But I want to close reading from Ephesians 4. And this is Paul in prison. And this is I get asked all the time. I think this is from the Message translation. I get asked all the time, where was that from? But I just want to read it over this group. Y'all are in the last days of this work. And I want to read this over you to spur you on in 2021 to dream and do well. So it says, in light of all this, here's what I want you to do. While I'm locked up here, I want you to get out there and walk. Better yet, run on the road God called you to travel. I don't want any of you sitting around on your hands. I don't want anyone strolling off down some path that goes nowhere. And mark that you do this with humility and discipline, not in fits and starts, but steadily pouring yourselves out for each other in acts of love, alert at noticing differences and quick at mending fences. You are all called to travel on the same road and in the same direction, so stay together, both outwardly and inwardly. You have one master, one faith, one baptism, one God, and one Father of all, who rules over all, works through all, and is present in all. Everything you are and think and do is permeated with oneness. But that doesn't mean you should all look and speak and act the same. out of the generosity of Christ, each of us has been given his own gift. And this is what's so beautiful, is that he handed out gifts above and below, filled heaven with his gifts, and filled earth with his gifts. And it is for the work within the body, the church, until we're all moving rhythmically and easily with each other, being fully mature adults, fully developed within and without, fully alive in Christ. And this idea that we all reflect a different characteristic of God. We have all been given different gifts, different wiring, different motivations, different strengths, so that together in community, we can reflect the wholeness of God. And that's what's so beautiful about this idea of building love through community. It's because it does this. When we do this, when we can do this work, when we can love God and love others well, how we were called to do, not being held back by the tension of feeling too much and not enough. Together inside community, we reflect wholeness. And that can do a lot of good in this broken world. So that is what I wanted to share with you guys. I'll hand it over to Joe and Rachel. If there's any thoughts, comments, or follow-up.
Yeah, let's take a few questions. Anybody have any questions for Jenn, Jett? You can either put in the chat or you can unmute yourself and go ahead and ask.
Jenn, what was it like, or what did you have to do to assemble Dream Defenders? That sounds like an awesome superhero team to me.
Yeah.
But I would love to know some of the process that you went through behind that.
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. I do get asked a lot. I think what I said about go first, like this idea of be that first to someone, it feels almost awkward because what it looks like is literally communicating intention and expectations with people in your life that feel that you can trust and are safe. So it's those people that you trust will speak truth into your life, challenge you, pray for you, be committed, and show up. It's having this literal mutual intentional conversation around that. It's not for everyone in your life. It may feel kind of weird for some people, but we've got a group on Voxer. I've been told it's for old people, it's a communication tool for old people. It's like a walkie-talkie app on your phone. You can do it a million different ways, Marco Polo, text thread, but I have that. I have assembled a group of Dream Defenders, and the moment I need prayer, or the moment I know I'm believing a lie, I will admit it in that crew, and they will speak over me what is true. They will push me, they will challenge me, they will pray for me. And so I think we've got to go first a lot of times and intentionally explain our expectations with those few people. Some people call them armor bearers. It's just those few people that are going to come alongside and show up and be intentional with them.
Let's take one more question. I know there's someone in here that has one good last question to wrap us up. Or even a comment. It doesn't have to be a question. All right, well, I'll be the one to make the comment. I know that a lot of these workshops have been things that our team has kind of come together. And, you know, what did we need? And as we're looking to build community through love, you know, how do we get rid of the fear that's holding us back from being a prominent organization in Northwest Arkansas, as well as across the country. And then, you know, what lies are we believing? You know, we're small, we're not capable of doing this yet. We don't really have a mission statement. You know, how do we apply for grants if we don't know what we're doing yet? And all these are different questions that's routinely going through our head. And it's funny that you said rhythm, because rhythmically we're constantly feeding ourselves negative energy, or where our rhythm is in a place where we are rhythmically consuming negative information. We're rhythmically telling ourselves every time we see defeat that, we're not capable. And the fact that, you have laid this out this way has been a powerful tool for us to keep going back and keep referring to. So I just want to thank you here at this very moment for just being on with us to wrap up our workshops for Mindset, Momentum, and Intentional 21-Day Reset. I think it's been great. Just to give a quick recap, our first workshops dealt with building us a foundation and like looking at, okay, where am I going this year? What goals am I setting? What resources and tools and people are around me to help me achieve these goals? And now in this week, it's let's build some momentum, because as you know, Jett, we can write visions down, we can make great vision boards, but if there's no action behind that, then it's nothing but pieces of paper with ink or lead on it. And so it's been an amazing experience to just have you on to share with us how we can continue to build momentum as we move out of this 21-day piece and move into our everyday life, having the rhythm and forming the routine to continue to dream, and then finding a team to defend that dream as well. So I just want to thank you for being on. Thank you so much for being on. Rachel is going to put something in the chat real quick. It's a quick survey. If you guys who are still on don't mind filling that out, we're going to send it to you right now. It's a quick Google form, just so that we know how we can make this experience better moving forward. Again, I mentioned this is our last workshop. We're wrapping everything up. The cool thing we have coming up on Saturday, it is a Revisiting My Why 5K walk run. I know it's cold in some places across the country. I'm not sure where everybody is, but if you all would like to do some type of 5K, it could be walking around your house multiple times. It could be going to a track and walking around the track. I invite you to join our 5K walk run. What you need to do is you'll need to go on to buildcommunitylove.com and then go to the Mindset Momentum page. There's instructions on how you can download the Nike Run Club app and get into our running community so that you can track your 3.115K experience. Revisiting your why. Your why is important. Your why is going to continue to wake you up every morning, living your life, living your dream on purpose. And so if there's nothing else in the community, please fill out the form. I would love for you all to continue to be active. If you have not been able to go through this entire 21-day experience, do not delay. You can start from the beginning. Everything is on the website, and these workshops have been recorded and are being recorded and will be sent out to you all as well to have for your revisiting, to revisit them on your own time. So be blessed. If you all can unmute and give Jett a good round of applause for tonight. And do you have any lasting words for us before we hop off?
No, it's been awesome now to see your faces. I love that. I love what you said about the rhythm. Keep going. Life will shift and move and stop and start and just keep going. There is a need for community in this world and to do it well. So love this community.
Absolutely. You all be blessed. Happy Inauguration Day for our country, whatever that means to you. And shout out to our first African-American vice president, woman vice president, and restoring hope to a country that is in desperate need of hope. Amen. Be blessed. We'll see you all soon.